Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 149 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome back to the show. In this episode, we're going to be talking about how to get the data that you need to get the perfect dope for your rifle. So one of the biggest issues that will haunt most shooters when they're shooting at distance isn't the wind. That can be learned and mastered. It's actually getting great working dope for your rifle. And there are some issues to come along with it and some good techniques to help. So in this episode, we're going to continue on our series of getting really good working dope for your rifle. And we're going to talk about getting data in the field to start working the dope. Thanks for joining us. But without further ado, here we go. All right, before we get started, I do want to say thank you to a couple of our sponsors, of course. We would like to thank TriggerTech. TriggerTech is the maker of fine rifle triggers. We put them in all of our custom rifles here. They are simple, they are safe, they are easy to adjust. They, in our minds, are the best on the market. They make them for lots of different makes and models. So if you want to upgrade your rifle, upgrade your trigger, stop over to triggertech.com. That's triggertech.com. We'd also like to thank MDT. MDT is the maker of fine rifle chassis. They make everything from the new Timber to the ACC Elite, ACC, the HNT 26. I mean, the list just keeps going on and on and on. A great manufacturing company, great product, and it's a good upgrade. So if you want to shoot well, you have to get your rifle to fit you perfectly. And in order to do that, sometimes you do have to change up the stocks and even the design. So if you want to look at all the great options available to you today, stop over to mdttac.com. That's mdttac.com today. So we just got back from the great state of Texas last week. And we did accomplish our move, which we're really excited about. We'll give a little bit of applause there for all the effort that everybody did in putting this together. But one of the things that going back to Texas is that, getting good working dope for your rifle. This is common. This is a conversation that we had at dinner for 2 nights. This is a conversation in the field. And I think the students and customers were sort of a little amazed at how far off they were. Even though it wasn't much, it was enough to make misses, even at as close as, 500, 600, 700 yards. So part of this and part of the equation is getting what your rifle needs, not what the ballistic apps or what the sheet that you print out says it needs. And they can be really conflicting, and they can be quite different from even app to app. So we used to print out here, and I don't want to throw out any names, 2 different ballistic tables from the same company. One is a new app, the other is online. It's the very same company. We would enter in all of the same data, all the weather information that we talked about that you're going to need, and we're going to talk about that here. But also, what you would see is that when you printed out the chart, even though we entered in the exact same information for the rifle at 1,000 yards, they were different. And this is from the same company. And so if they can't get 2 different apps that are using 2 different types of algorithms to match, imagine what it is across the board. I believe my best guess was I wouldn't call them ballistic calculators. I would call them ballistic guesstimators, because even though they're doing the best they can do, there is that fingerprint to your rifle. And that really makes a big difference. So let's step back and talk a little bit about the weather information that you're going to need. And then we're going to dive into the data that you got to get when you're working and when's the best time to do it. So as you can tell, I'm a little stuffy today. We finished moving our shop August 1st. We got everything moved in. Now we're not all set up. We have new carpet coming in. We have new 3-phase power that's being installed. We have machines coming. There's a new classroom design and, of course, some lodging and stuff on site as well. So there's a lot to do. I'm really excited, though, that my desk is set up and I can actually work. The armory is about fully functional. The reloading area is about fully functional. We're about ready to start working again. We might start into that today or tomorrow. And then it's just staying here and getting all the other parts and pieces of the business up and running. Our goal is here, as with any business owner, just to touch base on this a minute, is, you always want to grow and you want to hire and you want to train. And, we hired a young gentleman yesterday. He's going to be starting with us on Saturday. there's really cool in this industry to bring people in. And for the longest time, I misunderstood what a business really was. And I always thought that the business was there to be something that was my job, right? And what I learned is if you think of your business as your job, you're working for a maniac, and that's you, right? Because it will drive you crazy. It will keep you crazy busy. And you lose that long-term, I think, like vision of what a business could be and should be. And in the end, it's really just about making a product that's happy, make customers happy, make them smile, creating a service or something that means something to somebody. You have to give something back. And then on the other part of the business is growing and creating jobs. That's really what a business does, is it creates jobs. It creates, like one of our guys here that had just left for the PA State Police, he lost his job at college. He was in college, paying his way through college, and we hired him on. And, I said, hey, you ever build a rifle before? He's like, no. I said, we're going to train you. So we brought him on, couldn't find a job because of COVID, all this crazy stuff, and he's in college. And he turned out to be one of our best employees. We really miss him. He did a great job here. But it taught me that, he's helping us. He's helping us grow our customers and helping us provide the product for the customers and interacting with the customers when they come in. But in the end, we're also helping him. We helped him pay his way through college, pay for his gas, pay for his food, pay for his classes. It's a give and take, and it really dawned on me it's about creating jobs. And, we create product, and in our business, I would say we bring people joy and happiness through the art and love of marksmanship and accuracy, right? That's sort of what we do. That's our product, But in the end, our business is about creating jobs. And so we're excited. We hired a new gentleman yesterday. It's actually the younger brother of the gentleman we just lost, so we hope he works out the same. And we're getting ready to hire some machinists, and really just pretty fun. Lots of great growing opportunities. We have a Cerakote booth. We're getting ready to offer lots of different Cerakotes, and as well as some general gunsmithing as well. Just helping guys accurize what they have until they can step up and do something with a custom rifle, or when that time is right. So, we're all excited that we're moved in, we're functional, a lot more work to go, but I never complain. I always say that I got the greatest job in the world. I cannot forget that I get to do this for a living. It's just a blessing. And thank you everybody out there that's always helped and supported our business in doing this. It's a dream come true. So when summer comes along, if you get through Johnstown, you stop by and join us. Our address is live. It's on the website. You're more than welcome to give a call, stop in. Our stock wall and showroom is not up yet. It won't be up for about another week or two. We're putting in some new carpet and stuff. So if you stop in, you're more than welcome to. You'll see a little bit of a mess till we get everything completely put into place. But yeah, looking forward to having customers stop by and see all the cool things that we do. Take a look at all the different stocks and stuff like that. It's pretty fun. So grateful to be here, standing in the new audio room and working on the podcast in our new building. It's pretty cool. All right, so let's get back to getting good dope for your rifle. This starts with getting good weather information for the day you plan on shooting it, because what we're going to do, if I can try to make this really, really to the point, is we're going to get the weather information. We're going to get our drop at distances for that day, and that is that drop for that day in those conditions. Then we're going to use that data to fix our click chart to get it to say what we actually needed in the field. Once we get those two to line up, the only thing we have to modify at that point on is the weather conditions, or the things that we're going to go over here that change on a sometimes daily and even hourly basis, right? But you have to be cautious on the weather. So here, again, a good plug for Kestrel, you have to have a good weather meter. And we sell them here online. Stop over to our merchant store. We can ship you out one. We offer, and we really recommend not to get the one that's Bluetooth, because we don't want it talking real time to our phone. We really recommend getting the 3500 series. It has everything we need and the things that we don't. And the reason we need to get to that one is because it offers a little bit more weather information, a little bit more data that you're going to be able to get out of the meter itself. That's why it's a little bit more expensive. I believe they're about $200 now. So in our logbook video, you'll see that we have a list of weather information that we need to take down. And I'm just going to go over here on the podcast. The first thing you need to write down is, think about it this way: heat, height, and humidity, the 3 H's. They are going to play with your dope at distance. So the thicker or more dense the air, or the closer simulation to sea level we get, the more dope we are required, right? And the higher up in the altitude we get, the thinner the air gets, the further away from gravity we are, the less dope is required. So we have to get this information on the day that we're shooting. The reason this is important that we get it the day that we're shooting, because as weather conditions change, it can change your simulated altitude real time. And that's where like density altitude comes from. So the first thing you want to write down is your height off your Kestrel. Don't worry about where you're at on the map. Just write it right off the Kestrel because it's basing it off of other variables inside the meter. The next thing you're going to have to write down is your temperature. So the temperature for the day, your humidity. You're going to need to write down the humidity. You're going to have to write down the barometric pressure. This is a big one for Kestrel. You got to write down the barometric pressure. That is for what we consider quote unquote station pressure, but really what it is, it's barometric pressure real time where you're standing with the baseline set or the reference altitude set at sea level. So Kestrels will come standard with the reference altitude for barometric pressure set to sea level or 0. That is actually for shooters where you want it to be. Do not go in and modify that. I know hikers and other things will modify that number to give them a real-time altitude that they're at. But don't do that. Stay with reference to 0 because it wants to know the actual pressure where you're standing and using 0 as the baseline. Then you're going to take your wind and speeds, of course. You're going to try to take into consideration when you're going to the range and you're trying to get good working dope for your rifle. Going in a hurricane is not really a good idea. Going even on a really, really windy day is not a good idea. Me personally, when I was going out and getting all of this data, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get all the weather information that we're talking about. Again, stop over to our YouTube channel if you want to see how we do our logbook there, but we'll get all the weather information, and then we're going to shoot 2 distances. We're going to make sure we have a perfect 100-yard 0, so make sure your 0 is perfect. Make sure that you have the actual distance that you shot in there exact right. So if your target is actually 102 yards from the bench, make sure when you go back and start working to get your starter chart that you put in that's 102 yards, right? And don't introduce a 2% error right out of the gate. So what I recommend then is you're going to have this pre-made click chart that we talked about in previous classes. You know, we went in, we put all the information in to make a starter chart, right? We have a chronograph speed, we have the center height of the bore, we have the 100-yard 0, all the things that we need to start what we consider a starter chart, right? Now we're actually working to get dope. So we printed off the starter chart that's telling us that, hey, at 500 yards, we need X amount of mils, and at 1,000 yards, we need X amount of mils. And this works minutes or mils. Either way, it doesn't matter. The first thing I want to suggest is that when you're going to actually get real dope or data of previous engagements, in other words, the actual shots you've taken, what they really are, above or below, or what you really need to hit center, this is dope. You need to do it on a really nice day. And I know this is a hard game to play, but my suggestion here is to find a range where you can shoot first thing in the morning or at last light. I prefer first thing in the morning because usually in the morning, unless there's a storm or something coming through, usually you got like an hour and a half before the thermals start to kick in, the sun's coming up, you start to get some wind. And the other part is you're usually there by yourself. We are blessed that we have some ranges where we can actually shoot right at the crack of dawn. And so I'm there before daybreak. I'm setting up targets. I remember years and years ago, the only 1,000-yard range I had was an hour and a half from my home. And I would leave at like 4 in the morning. I would get up there at 5:30 before the sun's coming up. I'd hang my targets. I would be setting at the firing line waiting for the sun to crack. You know, I wanted to get this information correct without or with as little as interference as wind as possible, because the wind does move your bullet, not just left and right, but it does have an effect up and down as well. So when you're getting dope for your rifle, I have done it trial and error many times, shooting out to 500 yards and correcting it there will probably keep you correct out to about 700 yards. At 1,000 yards, you're going to start to see a variation or some gray areas come in, right? So the further out you can get your last reference point, the better off you're going to be. So, for example, one of my close ranges here, when we were doing a lot of varmint hunting, had a 500-yard range. We would set up a target at 100. We would do a piece of paper at 300. We would do a piece of paper at 500. I would dial what the chart would say, and then I would shoot for the best groups I can get out there at those 2 pieces of paper at 3 and 5. And then I would simply write down how far out they are, right? So let's just say at 300 yards, I'm 2 inches low or an inch low. And at 500 yards, I'm 3 inches low. I'm going to use that data to go back and start adjusting my click chart to get the 2 to match. With the closer shots, like if you do this at 3 and 500, so if you're limited to a 500-yard range, you can get good working dope out to that distance pretty quickly and easily. But what's going to happen is as you get out to 7, 8, 9, that's where the real drop off starts to happen. And so you're always going to find that you want to get that last group or that last data at the furthest distance you can shoot, because beyond it about 200 yards, it's going to be pretty accurate. Beyond that, it starts to get a little gray area. And so you always want to get to the furthest distance you plan to shoot. And that's my suggestion anyway. So if you know you're going to shoot to 700 yards a lot, maybe shoot 400 and 700. If you know you're going to shoot to 1,000 yards, though, shoot 3, 5, and 7, to get 3 reference points if you want. I recommend that you have 2. So what we're looking for with the reference points is the bell curve. So when you crack a round off, you picture the bullet going up and falling down, right? And so we're getting the first one. Let's just say we're going to shoot to 1,000 yards today. We're going to get the first one to 500 yards. We're going to shoot a really nice 5-shot group. And then we're going to go to 1,000, dial in our dope, miniature mils, it doesn't matter. And again, we're going to shoot a really nice 5-shot group, the best we can, right? We're looking for just the best fundamentals, really sharp on our A game. And then we're going to go down range and we're going to write, how far off we were high and low. And let's just say, for example, we went down range and at 500 yards, we were 3 inches low. And at 1,000 yards, let's just say we were 14 inches low, something like that. We're going to take that data, and I would recommend not doing this once and going back and fixing your chart. I would recommend, if you get this data once, like right there on the spot, go back and shoot it again, right there on the spot. Put a fresh piece of paper up, do 3 groups, do it 3 times, and try to do an average. Do 5-shot groups, don't do 3, do 5, or shoot a 10-shot group and go with the average. But I wouldn't shoot this one volley at each distance and call it good that you're going to have perfect dope. I would do it a couple times and use the averages, right? The other thing, just to throw out there, it's going to be a couple parts in the series, is make sure that your gun is either broken in or keep an eye on it, because as your rifle breaks in and past 100 to 150 rounds, you're going to pick up speed and velocity, which is, again, going to mess up your dope. So I always get a starter chart. I'll go out and proof it a little bit, but then once I get past 150 to 200 rounds through the gun, and then I'll clean it, I'll foul it out a little bit before I start shooting for groups. I had to get good dope, and then I'll really get my dope from my rifle. Now, here's the tricky part, and I might try to do on YouTube, how we would fix and adjust a chart so you can actually visibly see what I'm doing, real time. But we're going to take all that data home, and we're going to set in front of our computer with the ballistics program of choice that we have up. And now we are going to try to get the program itself to say what we needed, not what it thought we needed, because obviously they're different from each other. How we do that, and this is how I've learned to do it, and this is through a lot of trial and error. So it's, for me, there's no perfect solution, because everybody's rifle, the fingerprint's different. And we're going to talk about the Ford-Off program next in the next podcast. It gives you a little bit more advanced tools, but still what we're going to talk about next can still be a problem. So what I'll do is I'm going to slowly go in, I'm going to open up the app or the program on my computer, and I'm going to start changing some of the parameters and keep hitting calculate. And what I'm doing is I'm watching my 500 yard and I'm watching my 1,000 yard dope settings, minutes or mils, it doesn't matter. And I'm going to keep adjusting these until I can get them to match as close as possible. So in other words, I'm trying to get the bell curve. If you can picture from 100 yards to 1,000 yards, I've got 2 reference points, right? I've got one at 500 and one at 1,000. I am trying to get those to line up as close to perfect as possible. That keeps the rest of the curve intact and correct, right? This is why once we do this beyond 1,000 yards, we're usually pretty good out to even 12 or 1,300, then we start to get more error. And so, for example, if I was going to shoot to a mile a lot, I'd probably go and try to get good working dope for a mile and backtrack it from there. But here's the manual way to do it. And you can use anybody's technique you would like. This is mine, right or wrong. This is what we've used to cheat the program. Basically, we're going to lie to it to get it to say what we need, not what it thought we needed, right? The first thing that I'm going to go in and change in the program, so I'm going to go in and open up the program. I'm going to put in all the data that I put in for that day, right? That's on that chart, so they should match. Weather conditions should all be correct. Now, if we pre-made our click chart, or that our starter chart, and we went to the range and we used a little bit different weather conditions, or the weather conditions changed till we went back to proof our dope, that's okay. The big thing is now that you have dope, you have to know the weather conditions for that dope. So enter in all your weather conditions that you used that morning, make it exact, and hit calculate. All the information about your rifle, the speed, the bullets, everything that you entered in on your starter chart, plus the current weather conditions. And it'll bring up a click chart, right? And then I want you to sort of keep an eye on the 500-yard and the 1,000-yard dope that's on that chart. And we're going to modify 3 things we usually fix this. And I do it in this order. The first thing that I do is, you're going to look down, you're going to say, okay, we're in mils. So our mils at, I don't want to say at 500 yards, say we're 1/10 off, and at 1,000 yards, we're 5/10 off, 5/10 of a mil. Keep it simple, right? Before I change anything else in trying to fix this, the first thing I do is I adjust my scope height in the program. Now, I often get funny looks when I say this, but the reason I do that first is, A, we have, angle, usually 20 MOA rails and stuff built in, so there's some false data in there anyway. But we also have the curvature of the bore and some other things that we have to deal with. And by moving the scope height up and down and hitting calculate a couple times, and I'm not talking about big swings. I'm saying if your scope height is 2.15 inches, change it to 2.25, 2.35, 2.45. And start looking to see if we're getting our dope closer before we start modifying all the other things, right? The reason I like to do that first is because it keeps the actual bell curve intact. So, you picture the arc of the bullet. Us changing the scope up and down is basically bracketing the entire bell curve up and down intact. We're not bending it. We're not changing the curve. We're leaving it intact, right? And we're just going to do it to get it closer, right? So let's just say we change it in the up position. We go 2.25, 2.35, and we're hitting calculate, and we're going the wrong way. It's making our dope worse, not better. We're not getting closer to the numbers that we actually need. So we go the other way. We put 2.05. We're getting closer. We're almost there. We hit 2 inches, right? 2.0. All of a sudden, our 500-yard dope's lined up, right? So I'm okay with changing the scope height first a little bit, to try to get the numbers closer to what we needed. That's our starting point. Now, I'm not going to change our scope height by 2 and 3 inches. I'm only going to change it by, let's just say maybe 0.3 inches, 0.4 inches. I probably wouldn't go any much more than that. Again, we're nursing our dope in. We're not making big jumps to say that this is the one thing we're going to change to fix everything, because there's 2 other things we're going to adjust here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust my scope height just a little bit up and down to see if I can't get those numbers to move closer to what we needed rather than what the chart says, right? The second thing I'm going to do when I'm doing this chart is I'm going to adjust the BC. So let's just say we adjusted everything and we're close, but it's not quite there. The next tool in our toolbox to do a manual chart, now we're talking manual, is think of something like the Hornady program online, not the Ford Off, but the standard ballistics app. Think of the Burger app where you can go in and you can change these things. So I keep hitting numbers. I'm hitting calculate. The next thing I'm going to change is the BC. And I'm going to start moving the BC a little bit, watching that further number and getting it to move in the direction that I need it to move. We were saying that we were low, right? So we moved our scope height a little bit, and that brought 500 in line. Now we're going to start changing our BC a little bit, and we're going to keep an eye on 500, because as we change our BC, it can start affecting that as well. So it's like a seesaw a little bit. You start adjusting stuff at distance. If you just did your dope at 1,000 and went in and used these tools and straightened up at 1,000, sometimes the closer stuff will be off a little bit as well. So it's a little bit of a dance here. You're not going to get it perfect through the entire curve, but you're going to get it really close to stay on target. So I'll start playing with the ballistic coefficient. I'll start adding or taking away. I'm okay with doing this because for the longest time, everybody exaggerated what the BC was. I mean, men brag about the exaggerations of everything, right? And people who make bullets exaggerated a little bit too. So just because it says the BC on the box is this, don't take that to the bank. It might not be right, and people have learned this over the years. So start changing your BC a little bit up and down. And in this case, we're hitting low, so we're going to bring it up a little bit and seeing if we can't get that further shot to line up. And if you notice that we almost got it, but our 500 yard is now off again, we can change our scope height again just a little bit. And then we can change the BC a little bit. We're dancing, right? Small moves, keeping an eye on those 2 numbers. if you've got an extreme case where those two numbers aren't working it alone, because we don't want to change to BC. If the box says the BC of the bullet is 0.532 for G1, we don't want to make it 0.352, right? We, plus or minus 10% maybe. I wouldn't go much more than that. If you're still to make small adjustments and you're still not there, then the last thing I would change would be the bullet speed. And I know it's counterproductive. A lot of other manufacturers of these charts will go rate 2 speed, and they say, well, at this point, get your dope, but then you're going to use speed to adjust and get your curve in line. And I think that's wrong, because the speed is the one thing that we actually know is right. It's the BC we know is wrong for sure, and the scope height, which I think is the easiest way to move our bell curve up and down ever so slightly without changing it. So if in an extreme case where, we got curvature of the bore, other things are happening that we need a big adjustment at distance or bigger than what the first two tools allow, then I'm okay with adjusting my speed a little bit and trying to get that last shot in line. And the whole time I'm doing it, I'm watching my 500-yard dope or my 500-yard number, making sure that I'm not getting it out of sync. Now, it's not uncommon for one to be off a tenth of the other, right? So you have these two perfect numbers that you went out in the field and you've accomplished, and you've got, your dope for your rifle at 500 and 1,000 now. You know it in these weather conditions. If you go back and you do all this work and you have a choice, either your 1,000-yard dope is going to be a tenth off or your 500-yard dope is going to be a tenth off. You've got it narrowed down to that point, but as soon as you try to adjust for one, the other changes ever so slightly. I'm okay with that. And I would actually prefer the closer one be off a tenth, because it's a lesser value on target. So a tenth of a mil at 500 yards is a lot smaller of an error than a tenth of a mil at 1,000 yards. So let it float out just a little bit at the halfway point, knowing that it's such a small increment of error that it's still going to keep me on the plate. Then we're going to print that off. Those numbers are scope height, BC, speed. All of these things are now carved in stone for our dope. The only thing we have to do now is adjust for our weather conditions on a daily basis, or be careful that our barrel doesn't break in, right? And it should keep our dope in line. Now, we're going to talk about the FORDOF program here in a future podcast, and I might bring one of the guys from Hornady on to talk a little bit more about it. This is our solution here. This is what I've done for years and years and years and years, to lie to the programs to get it to say what I need, because the programs were wrong. The technology is getting better. Like we were talking about earlier, the Oler 58 that come out, that's using time of flight at distance to help true your dope a little bit. I'm going to agree with all of these tools that are coming out to help. It is a big problem. And I will tell you that when you go to a match, I'd rather you go in and lie your tail off to the program to get it to tell you what matches what you needed than just shoot the wrong dope. You've got to go in and fix it. And sometimes you got to go in and tell little white lies to the program to get it to match what you actually need, not what it thinks you need, right? So it can't go out and get the dope for you. It's telling you that, hey, in all these things and tests and parameters that we have, here's what we think it might be, but it's going to be wrong. So when you get your dope done, then keep that master copy, like keep 2 copies of it, because at this point, then all you're going to do is you're going to put that in the app. And then you're going to change your weather conditions on a daily basis, or when you go out to shoot, the rest of it's going to stay intact, and it's going to keep your dope a lot closer together as the weather changes. Really, the only thing now we're changing is the conditions that we're shooting in. Everything else, as far as the shooting or the dope part goes, is in line. This is old school. Now, for those that are into all the new programs and apps, there's a million ways to get dope, and there's a million ways that people are fixing it. I am sharing with you how we can go into a manual program like the Hornady standard program, and we can start adjusting things to get your dope ironed out correct for what you need. There are other people that have other ideas, and there are other ways that people do this. And I'll acknowledge that and say that someday I might come back and modify mine a little bit. But at least I'm telling you that here are some things that you can do to get it better, right? And so I'm not going to say that my way is the right way, the only way, and the best way in the world. There's really awesome technology coming out, getting this stuff easier and better to do all the time. But for those that don't know, or for those that are trying to get a good chart working, this is a good way to go in. And really, it's better to have this dope ironed out better for what your rifle needs than to just stay with the chart that you printed out that's wrong, right? Before we continue on, I do want to say a quick thank you to Krieger Barrels. Krieger is the maker of fine cut rifle barrels. They're made in the great state of Wisconsin. They are cut rifle. They're hand lapped. They are stress relieved. They, in my opinion, are some of the best in the world. They have a new program called KriegerDirect.com where you can log on and order your barrel and have it in as little as 2 to 3 business days. So if you're looking for a new barrel for your rifle and you want the best, stop over to KriegerDirect.com. That's KriegerDirect.com and get yours today. This particular podcast is going to continue on. We're going to get into the FORDOF program. We're going to talk a little bit about the zero angle a little bit. And keep an eye out. It's going to be a couple weeks, but we may do a YouTube video on how I would modify the chart old school. We're talking 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. But the cool part is the tricks of modifying these programs still work today. It's not perfect, but it's better to have good information and an imperfect way of getting it than just constantly using bad information. So hopefully that makes sense. So thank you everybody for taking the time to join us here on the podcast. We really appreciate it. We're getting into spring season, so we're getting ready to get into our shooting year. We're super excited. We got clients coming in next week for a reloading class. We've got a ballistics class coming up where we actually walk people through getting dope for their rifle. This is a really big deal. So we got clients coming in. I believe we have a gentleman coming up the whole way from the great state of Texas. So we're looking forward to having him come up as well. If you're interested and you'd like, we have our online long-range shooting school. We now have 40 instructional videos posted, which is incredible. It's our entire long-range shooting school that we hold here in person, going up piece by piece. We're probably a little over a third of the way there, which is a good sign, which means we're going to have, for reference, probably well over 100 videos to archive that you can go back and take as many and revisit and learn. And if you need a refresher, go back and click on any of the videos and watch again. And you can join them there at our online long-range shooting school. You can find that at wolfprecision.net. It's a monthly subscription. And the best way to attend is once you sign up on Patreon, come back to our shooting school page for online. And any of the highlighted videos in order, you can click on and launch and watch there from the screen. So thank you everybody that's joined us. We really appreciate it. It's been pretty exciting to watch, and we're getting lots of great feedback. So we're really trying to help people get the most out of their shooting, the most out of their rifle, and the most out of their equipment, and be able to do it from the convenience and comfort of their own home. So thanks everybody that's joined us so far. New videos released every week, and we're actually talking about a lot with the wind as we're speaking right now. We'd also like to thank everybody that's joined us on our Wolf Pack. So if you'd like the podcast and you'd like to support the show, you can stop over to Patreon. It's $3 a month and join our Wolf Pack. We have a couple shout outs we're going to be doing next week for some new patrons that signed up. Thank you so much for doing that. That really helps us out a lot here. We certainly appreciate it. So the next podcast we're going to get into is talking a little bit about the FORDOF program and some of the tools that they're going to give you, which we reuse here at the school now. It's not perfect. It's not the best, but it's good. It's really good. So we're going to talk about the FORDOF program next and some of the cool tools that are really coming online, making this a little bit easier, a little bit better, a little bit more faster, and a little bit more convenient, to be quite honest with you. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us here at the show. We really appreciate it. My name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host, and you're listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.